February 23, 1945. Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto huddled in a concrete bunker, his hands shaking as he scrawled words that would have earned him a firing squad if discovered by his officers. The Marines are not human. They do not die like ordinary men. Everything we were told about American weakness was a fabrication. He had just witnessed a spectacle that shattered every lesson drilled into him during training. 6 attackers had stormed their position under a hail of heavy machine gun fire. 3 collapsed, but the survivors pressed on without faltering. When his comrades unleashed a barrage of explosives, one foe used his own body as a shield to protect his squad, then resumed fighting despite catastrophic wounds, until his strength gave out entirely. The victors seized the site in moments. Nearly 21,000 Japanese warriors guarded Iwo Jima, buried in an 18-kilometer network of tunnels and impregnable strongholds. They had been assured they would face fragile Yankee invaders, ready to crumble under pressure. Instead, they encountered a truth that demolished every strategic assessment of the Imperial Japanese staff. The fallout from this miscalculation went beyond staff maps, embodied in the ferocity of close-quarters combat that claimed 26,000 Marine lives in just 36 days. The erosion of Japanese faith had begun long before this volcanic island. As early as August 7, 1942, on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, Sergeant Hideo Takahashi, hardened by conquests in China where the Rising Sun's forces seemed invincible, noted in his journal after the first days of fighting, "The Yankees who landed here are utterly different from any foes we've faced. They refuse to retreat even when trapped. They ignore surrender when despair grips them. Worse, they dominate the darkness as if night makes them invincible." Guadalcanal marked Japan's first defensive battle in the Pacific, and the Imperial Army anticipated an easy win against inexperienced American recruits. The 1st Marine Division that came ashore numbered just over 16,000 fighters. Japanese military intelligence portrayed these elite units as products of a soft, democratic society that prized personal comfort over collective devotion. Within days, every assumption collapsed disastrously. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome led a reinforced company tasked with retaking Henderson Field on the night of August 20th. His 200 men had crushed Chinese contingents 3 times their size. They advanced by the book, certain the Yankees would panic in the dark. But the Marines awaited them in meticulously prepared positions with interlocking kill zones. Fukudome's unit walked into a death trap. What followed defied all Japanese tactical principles. Instead of digging in, the defenders launched an immediate counterattack into the shadows, wielding automatic weapons with lethal precision. Fukudome's journal, recovered after his death 3 days later, recorded his shock. "They assaulted us in the dark. We were supposed to be the masters of night attacks. They moved through jungles we deemed impassable. They killed silently, then vanished. By dawn, only 90 of my men remained. The Yankees lost just 12. This pattern repeated across Guadalcanal. Japanese forces, accustomed to enemies who crumbled under banzai charges, faced position holders who fought until physically overrun, then engaged in knife, bayonet, or fist duels. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, who endured 4 months on the island before evacuation, wrote in a letter intercepted by American intelligence, "We were taught the Yankees are selfish, unwilling to sacrifice for comrades. This is wrong. I saw a Marine gunner keep firing with both legs shattered until our infantry finished him at close range. His assistant seized the weapon and continued. We lost 40 men to that position." The Marine training that forged such fighters baffled Japanese strategists. Private Yamamoto, who would later face these enemies on Iwo Jima, first heard of them in 1943 intelligence briefings. The instructor, a staff officer who had interrogated captured Marines, seemed genuinely rattled. "The Yankees undergo conditioning that would be criminal in any civilized army. They are broken mentally and physically, then rebuilt into something barely resembling the soft civilians they were. They're taught that dying in combat is honorable, that surrender is unthinkable, that they must fight until physically incapable. This echoes our Bushido, but they add something we didn't expect: American industrial might." This fusion proved catastrophic. Japanese warriors, steeped in Bushido demanding death over dishonor, wielded increasingly obsolete weapons against the Yankee arsenal. Marines, hardened by training nearly as brutal, produced fighters just as ready to die. But they landed with overwhelming firepower that made Japanese strongholds untenable. On November 20, 1943, at Tarawa Atoll, Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki commanded 4,500 defenders and fortifications deemed invincible. The 2nd Marine Division proved him wrong in 76 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Ogawa, one of only 17 Japanese survivors, told interrogators what he saw. The first wave was slaughtered in the water. We killed hundreds. More craft came. The second wave died on the beach. More followed. The third reached our lines with flamethrowers. They didn't stop until we were dead or they were. The numbers were merciless. Nearly 1,000 Yankees fell in 76 hours. The survivors proved they would seize any objective regardless of cost. Documents captured on Saipan in 1944 contained intelligence reports labeling Marines as shock troops displaying fanatical devotion to objectives. Marines reject retreat orders and counterattack even when tactically disadvantaged. Casualties do not degrade unit effectiveness until the unit is annihilated. This classification stemmed from methodical study. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, who escaped Guadalcanal, provided detailed comparisons. American Army infantry tactics are sound and conventional. The Marines operate differently. They advance aggressively regardless of losses. They accept casualty rates that would force any rational commander to halt. This is unprecedented. The speed of Marine operations proved as devastating as their firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, commanding on Peleliu, designed defenses based on prior campaigns where Americans paused after landings. The Marines never paused. They landed September 15 at 8:30 a.m. and controlled half the airfield by nightfall. Nakagawa's diary recorded his shock. My defensive plan collapsed because it assumed the enemy would act rationally. The Marines do not act rationally. They act with total commitment regardless of circumstances. This total commitment manifested in ways Japanese observers saw as suicidal but proved devastatingly effective. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, captured on Bougainville, described a Marine platoon assaulting a fortified hilltop. The approach crossed open ground swept by machine guns from 3 bunkers. Japanese doctrine would have required extensive artillery preparation followed by infantry under smoke cover. The Marine lieutenant assessed the position for perhaps 30 seconds, then ordered the assault with no preparation. The platoon charged straight into the fire. 7 fell in the first 20 seconds. The survivors reached the first bunker and destroyed it with grenades and charges. 3 more died assaulting the second. The remaining Marines took it. The third bunker fell to the last 5 men. The platoon suffered 12 casualties from 37 to seize a position deemed impregnable. The entire action took 4 minutes from order to completion. This was not mere courage, it was the calculated use of acceptable losses to strike faster than we could respond. The concept of acceptable casualties horrified Japanese officers trained to value soldiers' lives within the context of objectives. Marines calculated casualties as the cost of victory and paid it without hesitation when the objective warranted it. This created a psychological edge beyond material superiority. Japanese commanders, knowing Marines would accept 50% casualties for a position, faced impossible choices. Defend with insufficient force and lose the position. Reinforce and weaken elsewhere. Abandon and cede ground. Every option led to defeat. Only the timing varied. Major Yoshi Takahura, a senior staff officer on Iwo Jima who survived the battle, dissected this dilemma in post-war interrogations. General Kuribayashi understood we could not stop the Marines. Our defenses were designed to delay them and inflict maximum casualties. We succeeded brilliantly at inflicting casualties. Over 20,000 Marines were killed or wounded in 36 days. This would have crippled any other army's offensive capability. The Marines reinforced and continued attacking without any reduction in intensity. We calculated 10,000 casualties would halt their advance for at least a week. They suffered 10,000 in the first week and their advance never slowed. This revealed the fundamental imbalance. They could replace casualties faster than we could. They had 50 Marine divisions in the Pacific or training in the United States. We had finite defenders per island. Mathematics dictated our defeat. The mathematics extended beyond manpower. Marines landed with logistical support enabling sustained operations at intensities Japanese forces could not match. Second Lieutenant Toshio Yamamoto, captured on Saipan, witnessed the contrast during a nighttime infiltration. I led a patrol to observe American positions 3 days after their landing. We expected exhausted troops with limited supplies, as Japanese forces would be after 3 days of intense combat on a contested beachhead. Instead, we found Marines eating hot food, receiving ammunition resupply by truck, with medical tents treating wounded and rest areas for unit rotations. Their supply dumps held more ammunition than my entire regiment. They had mobile kitchens serving fresh meals. They had portable showers and laundry facilities. They were fighting the Pacific's fiercest battle and living better than we did in garrison. This proved defeating them was impossible. They would never run out of food, ammunition, medicine, or replacements. We would. This relentless American logistics created attrition warfare favoring Marines despite higher initial casualties. Japanese defenders fought from fixed positions with limited supplies and no reinforcements. Every casualty was permanent. Every round expended was irreplaceable. Marines fought from an expanding beachhead with daily supplies by ship and air. Casualties were evacuated and replaced. Ammunition was unlimited. The longer a battle lasted, the weaker Japanese defenders became while Marines grew stronger. This dynamic proved decisive on Poliliu, where Nakagawa's defense stretched from September 15 to November 27. The 1st Marine Division suffered such heavy casualties it was withdrawn and replaced by elements of the 81st Infantry Division in October. A 2nd Marine Division continued until Army units relieved them. The battle Japanese planners expected to last 1 week lasted 11. Japanese defenders inflicted over 10,000 American casualties, but the Americans could afford those losses and keep attacking. Japan could not afford to defend every island at such cost. The arithmetic was unsustainable. This unsustainability became clear to Japanese military leadership by mid-1944. Intelligence summaries sent to garrison commanders admitted Marines could not be stopped, only delayed. One document captured on Tinian offered guidance revealing complete abandonment of victory hopes. When defending against Marine assault, do not expect to hold positions indefinitely. The objective is to delay the American advance to enable other strategic goals. Each day of resistance is valuable. Each Marine killed or wounded is valuable. But understand the position will fall. Prepare accordingly. Stock positions with maximum ammunition. Create redundant defensive positions. Plan staged fallbacks. Except you will likely die in the defense. Your sacrifice buys time for the Empire. There is honor in this sacrifice even without victory. This grim calculus defined Japanese defensive strategy for the Pacific War's final year. Defenders no longer fought to win battles. They fought to make those battles so costly that Americans might negotiate rather than invade Japan itself. Marines, by accepting casualties that would have forced other armies to halt, negated this strategy. They paid the demanded price and kept advancing. No cost was too high. No fortress too strong. The offensive never stopped. Private Tadashi Ogawa, one of Tarawa's few survivors, later described the psychological impact of facing such an enemy. After the first day we knew we would lose. The Marines landed in overwhelming force. Their naval gunfire destroyed our positions. Their air support bombed us continuously. But we still believed we could make them pay such a terrible price they would reconsider future invasions. Then we watched them keep attacking despite horrific casualties. They walked through machine gun fire that killed dozens. More Marines came behind them. We killed them too. More came. We fought for 3 days with absolute commitment. We inflicted thousands of casualties. We died almost to the last man, and the Marines took Tarawa on schedule. They paid the price we demanded and continued their advance across the Pacific. That was when we understood the war was lost. An enemy who will pay any price to win cannot be defeated by making victory expensive. This realization spread through Japanese ranks as survivors carried their experiences to the next fronts. By the time Marines landed on Iwo Jima in February 1945, every Japanese defender knew they faced the Pacific's most implacable enemy. They knew their own deaths were inevitable. They knew the island would fall. The only question was how many Marines they would take with them. General Kuribayashi's defensive plan embraced these realities and built strategy around them. His orders to troops admitted what official propaganda denied. We cannot win this battle. We can only make the Americans bleed for every meter of ground. That is our mission. Accept death. Inflict casualties. Delay their advance. This is how we serve the Empire in its darkest hour. This assessment proved accurate battle after battle. February 19, 1945, D-Day on Iwo Jima, provided the most comprehensive Japanese military analysis of Marine capabilities. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, arguably Japan's most capable defensive commander, spent months studying Marine tactics and building defenses tailored to defeat them. His preparations were extraordinary. But before testing Kuribayashi's theories, Marine raiders had demonstrated capabilities beyond standard excellence. These elite units conducted deep penetrations, creating terror disproportionate to their small numbers. Japanese forces learned raiders operated in darkness with devastating effectiveness. Colonel Kayaneo Ichiki learned this fatally on Guadalcanal in August 1942. His 900 men had defeated Chinese forces through aggressive night attacks. Japanese doctrine held Americans feared darkness. Ichiki planned a textbook night assault against Marine positions at the Tenru River. Raiders from the 1st Marine Raider Battalion waited in prepared positions. Ichiki's force waded into the river at 1:30 a.m. on August 21. Raiders opened fire at point-blank range with automatic weapons supported by pre-registered artillery. The battle lasted 20 minutes. Japanese casualties exceeded 700 killed. Marine casualties numbered 35. The Raiders were disbanded and integrated into regular Marine divisions in 1944, but their tactics spread throughout the Corps. By Iwo Jima, standard Marine infantry employed techniques Raiders pioneered. Night patrols probed continuously. Small units made independent decisions. Communications enabled unprecedented coordination. The result was an enemy that fought 24 hours a day with intensity Japanese forces could not sustain. Sergeant Hideo Takahashi, who fought on 3 islands before capture on Okinawa, summarized the ordeal. The Marines never stopped. Day attacks with overwhelming firepower. Night attacks by small units infiltrating our positions. Constant artillery harassment preventing rest. Air attacks throughout daylight hours. We were under continuous pressure from landing to defeat. Japanese forces traditionally controlled the night to rest and regroup after daylight battles. Against the Marines there was no rest. There was no safe time. There was only continuous combat until we were dead or captured. This was industrial warfare applied without mercy. The industrial aspect of Marine operations fascinated and terrified Japanese military analysts. Unlike Japanese forces relying on spirit and individual sacrifice to overcome material limitations, Marines systematically applied maximum force to every problem. When faced with a fortified position, they did not rely on courage or clever tactics. They identified the position, called in artillery firing hundreds of shells to destroy it, brought forward tanks with flamethrowers to burn out survivors, then sent infantry to secure it. If resistance continued, naval gunfire from destroyers or battleships obliterated the entire area. This methodical destruction was horrifying in its efficiency. Second Lieutenant Saburo Endo, artillery forward observer on Saipan, watched Marine combined arms tactics during the June 1944 invasion. His diary recorded detailed observations. The Marines landed under covering fire from warships firing continuously for 3 hours before the first landing craft touched the beach. Aircraft bombed our positions for 2 hours before the landing. When Marines came ashore, every movement was supported by tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and air strikes. They advanced slowly and carefully, destroying everything in their path. When we stopped them at prepared positions, they called in battleship fire that literally erased hills from the landscape. They did not try to overcome our positions through courage or clever tactics. They used overwhelming force to eliminate the positions, then advanced. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial destruction applied systematically until resistance becomes impossible. We fought with rifles and light machine guns. They fought with an entire industrial nation's resources. Endo's observations captured what many Japanese soldiers realized too late. The Pacific War was not a test of warrior spirit or tactical excellence. It was a contest between Imperial Japan's limited industrial base and America's overwhelming production capacity. Marines were the cutting edge of that capacity. Warriors trained to exploit American advantages ruthlessly while accepting casualties that leveraged superior numbers and replacements. Against such an enemy, Japanese courage and tactical skill meant nothing. The outcome was mathematically determined from the start. Only the duration and cost remained variable. Kuribayashi banned the banzai charges that had wasted Japanese lives in prior battles. He created a defense in depth, channeling Marines into kill zones covered by multiple bunkers. He positioned artillery to deliver devastating fire on landing beaches. He built 11 miles of tunnel connecting 1,500 cave positions. Every approach was registered for mortar and artillery fire. The beach was a death trap. 3 Marine divisions, 70,000 men, landed on Iwo Jima on February 19. Kuribayashi's defenses worked exactly as planned. Naval bombardment barely scratched the fortifications. Marines landed in neat waves and immediately took catastrophic casualties. Within minutes, the black volcanic sand was covered with dead and wounded. Japanese artillery observers called down perfectly coordinated fire. The assault seemed to be failing. Then something happened Kuribayashi had not anticipated, though he should have from prior battles. The Marines did not withdraw to regroup. They advanced into the artillery fire. They found gaps between Japanese positions and exploited them. When bunkers stopped the advance, demolition teams crawled forward under fire to destroy them. When those teams died, other Marines took their place. The attack never stopped. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto watched from his bunker as Marines assaulted the position to his right. His diary recorded the incomprehension Japanese defenders felt. A Marine flamethrower team approached the bunker. We killed the operator. His assistant picked up the weapon and continued. We killed him. A third Marine took the weapon. We wounded him severely. He kept firing until the weapon was empty. Then he threw grenades into the firing ports until we killed him. By then, demolition engineers had reached the bunker entrance. The position was lost. This happened 30 times in the first hour. How do you defeat men who will not stop? The answer, as Japanese defenders discovered, was that you could not. The brutal arithmetic of Iwo Jima demonstrated Marine doctrine in its purest form. 70,000 Marines landed. 26,000 became casualties, including nearly 7,000 killed. But all 21,000 Japanese defenders died except 216 captured, most because they were unconscious or too wounded to resist. The Marines paid an almost unimaginable price, but they took every objective. Kuribayashi himself, who survived until late March 1945, sent his final assessment in a message smuggled to Tokyo before the position collapsed. The Marines are the most effective fighting force I have encountered. They possess several attributes that make them uniquely dangerous. First, their training creates soldiers willing to accept casualties that would break other units. Second, their firepower exceeds ours by a factor of 5:1 in artillery and 10:1 in air support. Third, their junior leaders make decisions at squad level that our officers make at company level, allowing them to exploit opportunities faster than we can react. Fourth, and most critical, they never stop attacking. There is no defense that can survive this combination indefinitely. This final point terrified Japanese defenders across the Pacific. Soldiers could accept defeat in battle. They could understand being outgunned or outmaneuvered. What they could not comprehend was an enemy that simply would not stop regardless of losses. Sergeant Hideo Takahashi, who fought on 3 islands before capture on Okinawa, explained in a post-war interview, "You must understand the difference between Marines and other American forces. Army units would attack, take casualties, and pull back to reorganize. This is sensible military doctrine. Marines would attack, take casualties, and continue attacking over the bodies of their own dead. This is not military doctrine. This is something else entirely." The quality that made Marines so feared was deliberately created through training that broke recruits down to nothing, then rebuilt them into warriors whose identity was inseparable from the Corps. Documents captured on Saipan included interrogation reports of a Marine prisoner explaining the transformation to bewildered Japanese intelligence officers. Boot camp lasts 8 weeks. For the first 4 weeks, drill instructors destroy everything civilian in the recruit. You are told you are worthless, that you will never be a Marine, that you should quit and join the Army. The abuse is psychological and physical. You are pushed until you think you cannot continue, then pushed further. Those who quit are publicly shamed. Those who remain learn that surrender is not an option. The report noted the Japanese officer's response. This resembles our own training but more systematic. However, the Marine prisoner then described something with no parallel in Japanese military training. The second 4 weeks, the instructors build you into a Marine. You learn that you are part of something greater than yourself. That every Marine who ever lived is your brother. This created psychological pressure, producing fighters who would advance when rational calculation said to stop. Japanese forces encountered this mentality in its most concentrated form during banzai charges that should have succeeded but failed catastrophically. October 24 to 25, 1944, Saipan. Colonel Takuya Takashi led approximately 3,000 Japanese soldiers in a final banzai charge against Marine positions. Japanese doctrine held that such an assault with absolute commitment would shatter any defense through sheer ferocity and the defender's fear of being overrun. The Marines of the 27th Infantry Division, positioned in the attack's path, were mostly sleeping when the charge began at 3 a.m. Japanese soldiers poured into the Marine lines, screaming, bayonets fixed, overwhelming forward positions through sheer numbers. Traditional doctrine would call for a fighting retreat to regroup. The Marines counterattacked immediately. Officers and sergeants organized desperate defensive stands at key positions. Marines used every weapon available, from artillery firing at point-blank range to trench knives in hand-to-hand combat. The fighting lasted 4 hours. When dawn broke, Japanese bodies covered an area 500 meters deep. American casualties numbered 90 killed and 247 wounded. 3,000 Japanese soldiers died. Private First Class Tetsuo Yoshida survived the charge with severe wounds. His interrogation report 3 days later captured the shock Japanese soldiers felt. "We were told Americans fear close combat, that they rely on firepower because they are cowards at heart. We charged into their positions expecting them to break. They fought us hand to hand and defeated us. I saw a Marine sergeant kill 7 men with a bayonet and pistol before he fell. This is not cowardice. We were lied to." The lies extended to every aspect of Marine capabilities. Japanese propaganda had spent years describing Americans as soft, individualistic people who could not withstand hardship. Marines sleeping in water-filled foxholes, eating cold rations for weeks, fighting in 100-degree heat with 80% humidity contradicted those claims. Japanese soldiers supposedly trained for hardship watched Marines thrive in conditions that taxed Japanese endurance to its limits. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, who survived Guadalcanal before transfer to Bougainville, where he was captured in February 1944, described the contrast in conditions. "We were on reduced rations by September 1942, rice twice per day, sometimes less. We supplemented with anything edible in the jungle. We watched the Marines eat 3 full meals daily, sometimes more. They received regular resupply by air and sea. They had fresh water, medical supplies, ammunition without limit. We realized we were fighting an enemy who would never run out of resources. That understanding broke something in us. The material superiority Marines enjoyed was devastating. When faced with fortified bunkers, Marines called in artillery delivering hundreds of shells in minutes, brought forward Sherman tanks with flamethrowers, and used naval gunfire that could level hills. If that failed, demolition teams packed hundreds of pounds of explosives against positions. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome, before his death on Guadalcanal, wrote the most comprehensive analysis of Marine combined arms tactics captured during the war. "The Marines do not fight like individual soldiers. They fight like parts of a single machine. Riflemen fix our position. Machine gunners suppress our fire. Mortars deliver smoke to blind our observers. Artillery destroys our bunkers. Tanks advance with infantry following. Aircraft bomb any position artillery cannot reach. This happens within minutes of contact, coordinated by junior officers using radios we do not possess. We cannot counter this because we cannot coordinate at the same speed. By the time our commander understands the situation and issues orders, the Marines have already moved to exploit our weakness. This speed of execution was possible because Marines delegated authority to the lowest possible level. Sergeants made decisions Japanese doctrine reserved for captains. Corporals led assaults requiring a lieutenant's authority in the Imperial Japanese Army. The result was an enemy that adapted faster than Japanese forces could react. When a bunker stopped a Marine advance, a sergeant would immediately redirect the attack through a different approach while calling in supporting fire, all without waiting for orders from above. Japanese defenders often found themselves fighting enemies who appeared in unexpected directions because Marines had identified and exploited weaknesses before Japanese commanders recognized they existed. The most feared Marine weapon was not rifles or artillery. It was the flamethrower. Japanese soldiers trained to die honorably in combat discovered flamethrowers offered no honorable death. Sergeant Hideo Takahashi, captured on Okinawa with burns covering 40% of his body, described the psychological impact. "We were taught to accept death in battle as glorious. Death by bullets, bayonets, artillery. These are warrior deaths. Fire is something different. You watch flames approach your position. You smell comrades burning alive. You hear the screaming. There is no glory in this death. It is industrial slaughter. This is what the Marines understood that we did not. Modern war has no place for glory. It is about killing the enemy as efficiently as possible using the best tools available." This realization came too late for most Japanese defenders. By 1944, every Japanese soldier in the Pacific knew facing Marines meant facing the deadliest combination of training, equipment, and doctrine the Americans possessed. Intelligence reports distributed to garrison forces described Marines with a mixture of respect and dread bordering on superstition. One document captured on Tinian in July 1944 provided detailed guidance on defending against Marine assaults. The report acknowledged facts contradicting years of Japanese propaganda. First, Marines are physically larger and stronger than Japanese soldiers on average due to superior nutrition since childhood. Second, Marines receive more ammunition, better weapons, and more reliable equipment than Imperial Japanese Army troops. Third, Marine training emphasizes marksmanship to a degree unmatched by Japanese forces. The average Marine rifleman can hit targets at ranges where our soldiers cannot. Fourth, Marines operate with air and naval support we cannot match or counter. Fifth, and most critically, Marines are trained to believe surrender is unacceptable. They will fight to death or victory. There is no third option. The report then provided tactical guidance revealing how thoroughly Japanese confidence had collapsed. When facing Marines, do not expect them to retreat. Do not assume casualties will degrade their morale. Do not believe superiority in numbers provides an advantage as their firepower negates numerical superiority. Do not attempt banzai charges unless no other option exists, as Marines will slaughter charging troops with automatic weapons and artillery. Do not expect them to fear nighttime attacks as they fight effectively in darkness. The only effective defense is prepared positions protected by interlocking fields of fire with multiple fallback positions prepared in advance and with the understanding that the position will eventually fall. The goal is not to stop the Marines but to exact maximum casualties before the position is overrun. This defensive doctrine acknowledged reality but offered no path to victory. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, preparing Iwo Jima's defenses in early 1945, understood this perfectly. He wrote to his wife in January, 1 month before the invasion, "I am tasked with defending Iwo Jima against American Marines. This is a mathematical problem with only one solution. The Marines will land with 70,000 men. They will have complete control of sea and air. They will bring unlimited ammunition and supplies. They will attack until Iwo Jima falls. My mission is not to defeat them. That is impossible. My mission is to make them pay such a terrible price that the Americans will reconsider invading the home islands. Every day I keep them fighting is a day the Empire has to prepare. Every Marine killed is one less enemy in the final battle." Kuribayashi's strategy reflected the evolution of Japanese defensive doctrine from confident aggression to desperate attrition. The Marines who landed on Iwo Jima on February 19 faced defenses designed not to repel them, but to bleed them in ways that would destroy American resolve. Every bunker was positioned to require direct assault. Every cave entrance was covered by multiple firing positions. Every meter of ground cost lives to take. The strategy failed because it misunderstood Marine culture. High casualties did not break Marine morale. They reinforced it. Every fallen Marine demanded vengeance. Every day of brutal combat strengthened survivors' determination to win. The worse the fighting became, the harder Marines fought. This was incomprehensible to Japanese military thinking, which assumed even fanatical troops had a breaking point. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto, who survived until March 10 before dying in his bunker, wrote his final diary entry the night before. "Tomorrow the Marines will reach this position. We have killed hundreds of them in the past 3 weeks. More arrive every day. They do not weaken. They do not slow down. They do not stop. I thought our spirit was stronger than American materialism. I was wrong. The Marines have both spirit and material. They have courage equal to ours combined with weapons and supplies we cannot match. They are what we claim to be. We are what we claim they were. This is the truth we die knowing." His bunker was destroyed the next morning by a Marine demolition team after a 6-hour battle that killed all 11 defenders and wounded 3 Marines. The position delayed the Marine advance by exactly 40 minutes before being bypassed by other units that continued advancing while combat engineers reduced the bunker. This pattern repeated across Iwo Jima thousands of times. Japanese defenders fought with desperate courage, inflicting terrible casualties, achieving nothing except their own deaths. The campaign ended on March 26. The final statistics told the story of what happened when Marines fought the best defenses Japan could create. 21,000 Japanese defenders died. 216 surrendered, most because they were unconscious or physically incapable of resistance. The Marines suffered 26,000 casualties from 70,000 men committed, nearly 40% casualties. Any other military force would have required months to recover. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions were back in action within 6 weeks. This ability to absorb casualties and continue fighting became the defining characteristic that most terrified Japanese defenders. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, imprisoned in Hawaii after his capture, explained in a 1946 interview what Japanese soldiers felt facing Marines. "The worst part was knowing they would never stop. You could kill half a Marine unit and the survivors would continue attacking. You could wound their leaders and sergeants would take command. You could fight them to exhaustion and they would attack again the next day. There was no way to win. You could only kill them until they killed you. That is not war. That is mutual annihilation. And the Marines had more men than we did. The American industrial capacity that produced waves of replacement Marines astonished Japanese military planners. Intelligence reports from late 1944 noted that Marine divisions suffered 75% casualties on Peleliu in September 1944, then returned to full strength within 3 months. Those replacements landed on Iwo Jima in February and fought with the same effectiveness as veterans. This ability to regenerate defeated units was beyond Japanese capability. The Imperial Japanese Army had no comparable training system, no replacement pipeline that could maintain unit quality while absorbing catastrophic losses. American efficiency extended to every aspect of Marine operations. Wounded Marines received medical treatment within minutes of being hit. Casualty evacuation by air and sea moved wounded men from battlefield to hospital ship in hours. Blood plasma, antibiotics, surgical care saved lives at rates unprecedented in military history. Japanese wounded often died from lack of medical supplies, from infected wounds, from injuries American medicine routinely treated. Captured Japanese soldiers watched Marines who should have died from wounds that would have killed Japanese soldiers instead survived to fight again. The final humiliation came after Japanese surrender in August 1945. Marines occupied the Japanese home islands expecting resistance from a population indoctrinated to die rather than submit. Instead, they found exhausted people grateful the war had ended. Private First Class Tetsuo Yoshida, repatriated in 1946 after recovering from wounds received on Saipan, described his return home. Everything we were told was lies. The Marines did not torture prisoners. They provided food, medical care, shelter. They treated us better than our own officers had. The Americans were not barbarians. We were the barbarians. This knowledge destroyed what remained of our faith in the empire. Thousands of former Japanese soldiers reached similar conclusions. The post-war interrogation reports revealed common themes. Respect for Marine fighting qualities. Bitterness toward Japanese leadership that had lied about American capabilities. Recognition that the war had been hopeless from the start because Japan could not match American industrial capacity or the fighting quality of troops like the Marines. The most comprehensive assessment came from General Tadamichi Kuribayashi's final message from Iwo Jima, delivered through desperate radio transmission on March 21, 5 days before the island fell. He wrote, "I have fought the Marines for 31 days. They are the finest soldiers I have encountered. Their training is superior. Their equipment is overwhelming. Their courage equals ours. And their numbers are endless. Japan cannot defeat such an enemy. We can only die fighting them and hope that our sacrifice buys time for peace negotiations that preserve something of our nation. To my fellow officers preparing to defend the home islands, know this. The Marines will come. You cannot stop them. You can only make them pay in blood for every meter of ground. Perhaps if the price is high enough, they will negotiate rather than destroy everything. That is our only hope." That hope died with the atomic bombs in August. But Kuribayashi's assessment of Marines proved accurate. They were the tip of the spear that broke Japanese defensive lines across the Pacific. They paid a terrible price with casualty rates that would have destroyed lesser organizations. But they never broke, never retreated, never surrendered an objective. They were exactly what Japanese propaganda had claimed the Imperial Japanese Army was. Invincible warriors who would fight to death before accepting defeat. The final irony was that Marines achieved this through systematic training and overwhelming material support, not through mystical warrior spirit or racial superiority. They proved that modern warfare required both courage and industrial capacity, both training and technology, both individual sacrifice and national resources. Japan had courage and training. America had everything. The Marines embodied that totality in a way no other American unit matched. Japanese veterans recognized this distinction. Sergeant Hideo Takahashi, interviewed in 1975 as an old man, summarized what his generation learned fighting Marines. "We were taught that spirit conquers material, that our will to die made us invincible. The Marines taught us that spirit plus material conquers spirit alone. They were as willing to die as we were. But they had Sherman tanks and naval gunfire and unlimited ammunition and air supremacy and medical care and food and all the resources of America behind them. We had our rifles and our courage and promises of victory. That was not enough. It was never going to be enough." The Marines proved that on every island they took. The statistical record supports this conclusion. Marines fought in every major Pacific campaign from Guadalcanal in August 1942 to Okinawa in June 1945. They suffered 86,000 casualties, including 19,500 killed. But they never failed to take an objective, never abandoned a position once captured, never gave Japanese forces reason to believe Marines could be defeated through superior tactics or fighting spirit. The price was terrible. The results were absolute. Japanese military analysts studying Marine operations after the war reached unanimous conclusions. The Marines represented the ultimate expression of American military power. They combined warrior ethos matching Japanese Bushido with industrial resources matching American production capacity. They trained soldiers willing to die for victory while providing those soldiers with weapons and support that made victory possible. This combination was unbeatable. The lessons learned came too late for the 21,000 Japanese soldiers who faced Marines on Iwo Jima, or the 30,000 who fought them on Okinawa, or the hundreds of thousands who prepared to fight them on the home islands before surrender ended the war. Those men knew only that Marines were the enemy they feared most, the enemy their officers could not stop, the enemy who would keep coming regardless of casualties until every Japanese defender was dead. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto's final diary entry, written hours before his death in a bunker on Iwo Jima, captured this knowledge. He wrote, "The Marines will win not because they are braver than we are, not because they want victory more than we do. They will win because their nation gives them everything they need to win. And they will use those resources without mercy until we are all dead. This is the truth our leaders should have told us. We are samurai fighting with swords against men with machine guns who also have the spirit of samurai. There was never any hope. There was only death." His bunker fell the next day. The Marines who cleared it found his diary and forwarded it to intelligence officers who translated it and filed it among thousands of similar documents. The words captured a truth that Japanese soldiers across the Pacific had learned through brutal experience. Fighting the Marines was not like fighting other American forces. It was not like fighting British or Chinese or any other enemy. It was fighting an opponent who combined everything Japan claimed to possess with everything Japan lacked. That combination made the Marines the most feared enemy Japanese soldiers would face. The statistics tell part of the story. The battles tell more. But the words of Japanese soldiers who survived to tell of it reveal the complete picture. They fought men who would not stop, who would not surrender, who would die before accepting defeat, and who had the weapons and support to make that spirit devastating. Against such an enemy, courage was not enough. Training was not enough. Determination was not enough. Nothing was enough except surrender or death. The Japanese army chose death. The Marines inflicted it with implacable efficiency. This is why Japanese soldiers dreaded facing Marines more than any other unit. The Marines declared they would reach the objective and they did. They declared they were ready to pay any price and they paid it. They never stopped. Japanese defenders learned that courage meant nothing against an enemy so determined and whose firepower overwhelmed theirs, rendering all resistance futile. This was the lesson learned in blood, from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. After the war ended and propaganda vanished, Japanese veterans acknowledged the truth their leaders had hidden. The Marines were everything Japan claimed of its soldiers, backed by everything Japan could never provide. Against such an enemy, the war was lost from the start. The Marines proved it unequivocally, island after island, at the cost of thousands of lives lost on both sides.